So Dacia is an artist herself, and of Chippewa Cree and Mexican heritage, and weaves the cultural teachings and values that she holds into her work as she works to empower community. As mentioned a moment ago, Dacia is also a co-founder of Indigenous Made Montana, which is what we are gathered here today to hear about. And and has really spent a significant amount of her personal time bringing this amazing collaborative to life. We're going to hear from Dacia about um, how her personal and professional aspirations have converged to advocate for Indigenous peoples through the education, community organizing, and of course, the transformative power of art. Without further ado, I would love to turn it over to Dacia.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm happy to be here and happy to share our story. So I have a slide that I'm going to share. So today I'm going to talk about the cultural values with a contemporary vision and the story of how Indigenous Made Montana's supports Indigenous artists. So we are an inclusive and equitable platform. We're dedicated to centering and celebrating Indigenous artists, art, and culture. And our mission is to celebrate and honor Indigenous creativity. We're committed to fostering sustainable cultural preservation, creating economic opportunities, increasing representation for Indigenous people. So this is my co-founder and I am Dacia Red Thunder Griego. I'm Chippewa Cree and Mexican. And my co-founder and one of my very best friends is Letitia Yazzie Buck Elk Thunder, who is Blackfeet and Navajo. And we met in 2018 at a sewing class that was put on by All Nations Health Center. It was Missoula Urban Indian Health Center at the time. And it was taught by a friend, Crystal Whiteshield, and it was a regalia making class. So we have daughters about the same age, and we were both making fancy shawl regalia, and we sat next to each other at this class and just immediately connected, especially having daughters the same age, and our names kind of sound familiar with like that sh sound in it. And our daughters actually have similar names. And so we just immediately kind of clicked. And then as the class progressed, we helped each other out and just visited and became really quick friends. This is a picture of us at the class. So this is when we first met. And in the back corner is our daughters playing or doing something. It's super cute, but we became friends after that and just stayed in touch and would visit and just had a lot of commonalities as far as our personal and cultural values we found were really similar, and also just our journeys as artists and makers and moms. At that time, I hadn't been putting my art or any work in markets, and Letitia was putting her work in markets. And so we had pretty different experiences. I was doing mine like kind of individually or online. I had an Etsy shop at that time. So we would also talk to each other about that process, and just had a lot in common. And we, a couple years later, were sitting at the river. We went to the Black River with our daughters, and we were playing in the water. And we were just visiting about how we wish there was a space where we could continue to do things like have those classes or have markets that were run by Indigenous people, or it was a whole Indigenous market, and that it was something that could happen on an ongoing basis, that it was in the middle of town, and just a welcoming environment for everybody. And we had that conversation, and we were dreaming really big. We're like, what if we had a store? What if we had events? What if we had holiday parades, like all kinds of stuff that we were talking about. And just how much we were like, wait, if we want this, like, wouldn't it be cool to have that for our daughters? Wouldn't it be cool to have that for other community members in this area? And so we had that conversation and it just grew. We couldn't let that dream go. We would talk about it every time that we were together. And then eventually we just kind of got the nerve to say, let's just try it and see what happens. And so we really wanted to have a space where we were represented. We talked a lot about how when there were markets for Indigenous people or Indigenous events, a lot of the times it wasn't hosted or planned by Indigenous people. It would be allies, and it would be very appreciated that it was happening at all. But there, we also talked about the importance of having control over our own narrative and talking about our own perspectives and experiences. And so we really wanted to have a community or a place where Indigenous stories and art and celebrations were hosted by Indigenous people for the most part. And we also wanted to make sure that all of our community members felt represented, from our littlest ones to our elders. So that was really important to us. It wasn't we just really wanted to make sure that we had our whole community and all of our relatives in mind with this idea that we had. So we decided to choose a date and we launched on Indigenous Peoples Day in 2022. We launched on our Instagram platform, and that kind of blew up more than we expected, and it was really exciting. And then we hosted our first market in collaboration with the Tracks Bridge dedication in downtown Missoula with the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes and their celebration powwow. So we had 40 vendors at that first event, and the energy just from that, the dedication and the honoring of the Bear Tracks Bridge was incredible. I couldn't have asked for a better way to launch what we were doing and to be able to partner with the tribe in that way. These are some pictures from that first event of some of the artists and vendors that were with us. And then we are very community informed. So from the beginning, we really wanted this project or idea to be for our whole community. It was about our daughters and about all of the relatives that live in this community. We wanted something for all of us. And so we really made a lot of intentions to become community informed. So before we even launched, we had a lot of conversations with people who had planned markets in the area, or artists who had been part of those. We talked to elders and youth, just as many people as we could about what we were doing and what their thoughts were. We didn't want to step on toes of anybody who had already been part of the market circle. And we also just wanted to get feedback and make sure that people understood what we were doing before we launched. So we did that work before Indigenous Peoples Day. And some of the things that came up a lot were having visibility and representation, that a lot of times it could feel like Indigenous art was like a checklist to events that were non-Indigenous, like, let's have this whole event, and at the end, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we like had some Indigenous art there too? Instead of it being the opposite way, where the highlight and celebration was for Indigenous art and artists. So that was one thing that came up often. And um, representation in spaces that were prominent in Missoula. So we talked about like a lot of the events previously were happening in kind of like smaller venues, and we were like, let's go big, let's go to Karis Park, let's go to the fairgrounds in Missoula, and just really want to highlight and spotlight and empower and uplift all of our artists and put them in places where they deserve to be, right in the middle of town. Also cultural preservation. So one of the things that we've balanced along the way is being contemporary people, but also having these traditions that have continued for generations, and making sure that we preserve and do what we can to continue those. So making sure that people are feeling empowered to share their cultural practices and to share contemporary art too. So we have a really awesome variety of artists who do, sometimes one person will do both, and sometimes we have people who do just contemporary and some who just do um, traditional. And then economic empowerment, one of the biggest things is that we wanted to create opportunities for artists and Indigenous people to increase their income and to help make ends meet. And art is one of the, like, I think just ways of life for a lot of Indigenous people. It's a way that we tell our stories. It's the way that we live in a lot of ways, our clothing, and um, yeah, just all kinds of things that we do to create art just on an ongoing basis, but it's also a way for us to have an income. And we wanted to create something that was more consistent and stable and that people could try to rely on a little bit more to make ends meet. And so that was another driver. And then community building. So one of the things that also came up was for non-native community members wanting to be able to connect in a way that was respectful and in a way that was appropriate, a safe place where they could ask questions and have that education, and also a safe community for our Indigenous artists too, to know that if they go to a market with us or to an event with us, they're not going to be the only Indigenous artists there. So there'll be more people there. It's not going to be just them that stands out. And then it's building relationships with each other too, which has been my favorite part. So representation, these are some of the artists that we work with on this page. So Derek Husky and Jerry Bird, Matt Bell, Sienna Hill, and Lucy Lopez. And I think these ones were at a mix. Some of them are at our winter market, one of them was at our summer. And then visibility and representation. So we've since we launched, we've hosted 16 events at 6 venues in Missoula. We've worked with 98 artists and 11 community partners. This one is Aspen Decker. Cultural preservation, this is Luis Antonio Maceth, and this is the winter market. So again, just trying to make sure that our artists feel empowered to be able to perpetuate their own traditions and have access to the resources that they need. Especially in an urban environment like Missoula, that can be really hard to have access to some of those things. So making connections with each other has been really important, and then also just helping access some resources. Economic empowerment. So some of the opportunities that we've created are our markets. Of course, that's probably our biggest, most well-known initiative is the Indigenous Made Markets. We've also started curating a shop. So it's like our pop-up traveling boutique, we've called it. So we've gone to different places and we work with artists on consignment to sell their art for them, and then they get a large portion of those proceeds. And then our community partners, we work with a lot of partners who will share opportunities with us that they need art for this thing or they're hosting something. And so we can kind of vet it and make sure that it's going to be something that's comfortable and safe and a good opportunity. And then we can share with our network of artists. And then, oh, and that's Shelby Cole. And then just community building. So just making our events and spaces really celebratory. So when you come to an Indigenous Made event, they're very uplifting, they're really positive, really good energy. And I think that we focus a lot on our cultural resilience, our community connections, and they're just really fun. It's a celebration. We try to really be intentional about like the vibes that we have at our events. And they're not like solemn. We wanted to make sure that we're not um, presenting ourselves in like a pitiful way, that we're not people who always need to be saved, or that we're resilient people too, that we're contemporary people. We even like our playlists are very intentional. We'll mix dance music with contemporary Indigenous music, and then like music that's non-native and contemporary, just to kind of have that mix of who we are today and all those different parts of us. This is Sunshine and Valda. And then these are our artists, some of our artists. This was at our very first winter market um, in 2022. This was the day after a Small Business Saturday in November. And this was at the end of the market. And we were all just excited and happy. It was an awesome turnout. For this one, we were really nervous. It was our first solo event, and we were setting up and everybody was ready to go, and it was almost time to open, and we just got hit with the nerves of what if nobody comes, what's going to happen, is this going to work? And then the doors open and people just flooded in, and it was incredible. And to see all the people visiting with our artists and getting to know each other and those community connections that we're building, and then to see people leaving the market with all this beautiful art was just the most amazing thing. And then the art, this is some of the art that our makers create. It's vibrant and beautiful. I'm inspired every time that we host. We've been able to connect people to do classes with community partners. That's something that we hope to eventually do as well. And just a really big variety with jewelry, basket making, ceramics, traditional clothing, contemporary clothing, fine art, stickers, like just about everything, the leather work, quill work. We just have an incredible network of talent in this area. I would say probably like 80% of our artists are either in Missoula or like the immediate surrounding area. And then we do have artists further out in Montana. And then we've had a couple join us from Idaho and Washington as well. And then this is a quote that just inspires me all the time and kind of is something that we share all the time. This is from Louise Riel, who is Métis. My people will sleep for 100 years, but when they awake, it will be the artists who give them their spirits back. And I really believe that. I think that our artists just tell our story in so many ways, that they share their stories and the diversity within our people, the commonalities, strengths, and resilience that we have. And in our community, our artists are really helping to create that bridge between Indigenous people in our community and non-Indigenous people, and just making a really welcoming and uplifting environment and space for everybody. Our next event is in partnership with All Nations Health Center and Cora K Productions. We are doing a film and fashion show. I'm super excited about it. It's called Trends and Traditions of the Plains. It will be on November 1st to kick off Native American Heritage Month at the WOMA in Missoula. And we will be doing like a call for art and designers soon. And I would say that if there are artists who are interested in being involved in any way, to definitely reach out, even if it's not for this event, but for others, or even just to have a platform of other artists to connect with. Definitely reach out. Our website's indigenousmademontana.com, and all of our contact info and more info about us is on there. And that is what I have for today. Thank you so much. I'd love to open it up for discussion and questions. And let me stop sharing my screen. Yeah, I'd love to hear if anybody has questions or wants to hear more about certain aspects of any of that. I do want to say quickly to our artists, we share our artists' art and pages on social media a lot. So Instagram is like the best way to follow us and kind of connect with the different artists. And then on our website too, we're building artist profiles. So some of them are there's a question. Some of them have links on our website as well, and we'll continue growing that. On November 1st, we're still working on the exact timeline, but it will be kind of an all afternoon and evening thing. It'll be a film festival in the afternoon, and then in the evening will be the fashion show.
Well, Dacia, thank you so much for that wonderful and also visually stunning presentation. I really enjoyed seeing not only the art, but also all of the artists. I just want to kind of give a little bit of a recap on a couple of things. And then if it's all right, I might just kick off with a question or two, and we'll see if we have some additional questions from folks in the chat as well. So, I kind of just I want to recap those community informed objectives,
Mhm.
and visibility and representation, cultural preservation, economic empowerment, and community building. And I just think it's so important to uplift the fact that the two of you, had this vision, and then, of course, set out. Your very first step was to go out to the community and start having these conversations and say, "This is what we're thinking. What are you all thinking?" That's like community building and organizing 101, and I love it so much in this context as well. But of course, your background, and of course the two of you would bring that kind of magic to this endeavor. um and then, you said something earlier that really grabbed me. You said art is a way of life for Indigenous people. And I was hoping maybe you could, talk. You gave an example of you know clothing and kind of, I believe, like the implements and things that Indigenous peoples have used throughout time as examples. Um, is there anything else that you would like to add to that idea that art is a way of life for Indigenous peoples?
Yeah, I think that all of us have our own traditions and practices dependent on kind of our own upbringings and tribal backgrounds. But we that's something we talk about a lot is like that's art. Like so much of what we do is art. There's singing and dancing, and parts of those can be celebratory and kind of open to the community, but it also can be ceremonial and more private. But those are also forms of art. And then one of the biggest forms of art I feel is our oral tradition and storytelling, and that's a commonality that all of our people have. Just different stories, but that's an art form, is being a storyteller. And I think that art in a lot of ways is telling stories, and whether it's through dance or singing or performing in a different way, or physical art like beadwork and quill work. A lot of, if you come to our market and you see somebody's art and talk to them about it, a lot of times there are stories and connections about what that art signifies and what it means to that artist. A lot of color patterns or motifs and symbolism that's used in art is really significant to that person who's created it. And even like clothing and regalia and all of that, like sewing and just so many things. And if you think back to past generations of my ancestors, I think about their day-to-day life was like an art form, even from like being sustaining themselves on bison and using different parts of it for food and shelter, but also to adorn themselves with jewelry and for toys for their kids and things like that. So it just wasn't like, oh, I'm going to art class now. It really is something that's like integrated in everything that we do, I feel like.
Thank you for that. So you had also mentioned, and in relation to the second objective of the cultural preservation, that there is this dynamic between the history and the cultural connections behind a lot of the art, but also this contemporary, like here we are, contemporary living, breathing beings, and we have these contemporary takes on what art is and what art can be. Um, and I just thought that was so incredibly important as well. And having, been to a number of the markets, one of my favorite things about Indigenous Made is seeing that infusion, not only of more traditional art forms, as well as some very, very contemporary art forms, but also the interweaving of the two on a regular basis. Um, Another thing that really struck me is how you were talking to us about creating this really intentional vibe for the events themselves, and that even thinking through a playlist, for example, of what goes into it. Um, is all of that work, the coming together of the different elements to create the events and opportunities themselves, is that the work of you and Tisha? How do you go about it? Do you have sort of committees that weigh in on each and every event? If you could just talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, for the most part, when it comes to like the logistics of everything, it has been Letitia and I. Um, we have definitely gotten feedback. We, after events, try to do follow up with the artists to kind of see what worked or what ideas they have. And then in between, we've visited individually with people. We've hosted a couple of kind of like open house type events to just visit with the artists and kind of hear their ideas. And then we always open up our planning to other artists. Whoever wants to join and help basically is always welcome to help. And then for music, a lot of times we have hired an Indigenous DJ who then we share like, this is what we want to play. And then they infuse some of their own stuff in there too. Question, how do you find artists? So a lot of them, when we first started, we knew a lot of them just personally. So that was kind of our first stop, I guess, was like just visiting with the people that we knew when we got started. And then we put out calls, art calls on social media, and we started building our own like mailing list or artist network. So can, we have a newsletter that goes out and then we can send it out directly. And then I think people come to the markets too. We've definitely had people come to the markets who say like, hey, making something and like this is kind of what I do. I've never been to a market before, but I would maybe like to set up at your next one. And so we've definitely met people at our markets who then become part of our family and join in later markets. So, and then word of mouth too. Definitely people are just sharing with others about their experience with our events and sharing with the artists that they know as well. What have I learned while doing this work? Oh man, there's been so many things. I think it has been the most rewarding thing that I've done. Just creating a community that feels so positive and uplifting to each other. It's very just like mutually respectful and just empowering with each other. So it's been so positive in so many ways. I think event planning is definitely something that I like didn't know that I was going to love as much as I do. But just like some of those little things about um, like timing of things and how to do little things like a press release and how to manage conflict. It happens at events, not like big conflict, but things like how something is set up or like the logistics of things like that we have to kind of manage at the last minute and think on our toes. And um, that's been big. It's been fun though. It's been really fun. And I think just navigating, also being in the spotlight, that was something that we never intended at all at the beginning. Both Letitia and I are not like, oh, we're gonna be like influencers or we're gonna be like the face of this organization. Like we both never and still don't have like a comfort of that. So that definitely learning how to feel comfortable talking about what we're doing. And because we love what we're doing and are passionate about it, it's become easier. But having to do like media interviews with the camera on your face and that stuff, we're like, oh my God, you do it. No, you do it. And have had to take turns going back and forth. And then the other thing is moving a friendship into a business partnership has been huge. And thankfully, like we were friends for like probably about 4 years before we decided to dive into this. And so we knew each other really well and knew that we had the same values. And I think that's been the most important thing because when things have gotten difficult and stressful, we kind of are both able to go back to that, like, why are we doing this? And it's the same thing. Like, we wanted to create something for our community that we both really care about. And we balance each other really well. Like, we have kind of opposite strengths in a lot of ways that just work really well together. So we are able to kind of work off of each other and motivate each other and inspire each other. And then just, yeah, like some of my weaknesses are her strengths and vice versa. So it's just been a really awesome partnership and friendship.
Right. There's those touchstone of shared values. I don't think can be uh, overvalued.
Yeah.
We have a question from the audience. How can people contribute to this enterprise?
Yeah. So we definitely have been fortunate to have funding sources. So our first source of funding was through the Women's Giving Circle, and that was critical in helping us launch. We launched in October 2022, and then we submitted our grant like the same day, I think it was like due, our grant application for the Women's Giving Circle. And that awarded us with $10,000 that helped us launch what we are doing. We wouldn't like we needed that. It was like a really a launching pad to help us get the resources that we need and to be able to help with like marketing and our website and things like that, just those overhead costs that we wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. We're immensely grateful for that opportunity and all the women who helped make that happen. But yeah, so we're working towards finding other opportunities. So people can help by sharing grant opportunities that might be helpful, investing or donating into what we're doing, referring to sharing our events, like sharing them out with your networks, letting other artists know that they can come and join us. Yeah, and then coming to our events and purchasing work from our artists.
Tony, did
Um,
you have another question?
yeah, always. I have a bazillion questions always. I mean, one, I wanted to use my voice on this one just because I wanted to commend you for your eloquence and like your ability to speak to the work that you're doing. I think it's a real art. It's hard to do. You shared that you were, maybe had to work through some discomfort to do it. And I'll you can't see it at all. You've just done such a wonderful job. So I just want to commend you on that part, and all of the hard work that y'all are doing. I'm curious about the future. I mean, you talked about the importance of the arts, how they extend, you know, kind of deeply into culture and into relationship with self and community. And some of that can show up in a salable format, and some of it is not salable, right? Like you can't kind of commercialize some of the arts aspect. Is there a part of your work that welcomes those pieces? Do you feel like the kind of the commercial aspect is really important, like the to be able to build economy and agency through that? Can you speak to that and speak to maybe the future of the work that y'all are doing?
Yeah, definitely. So we still have tons of really big dreams, and I think hearing more and more from our community, it's been really fun. Like every market, we go around and visit with the vendors and artists and hear their ideas and hear their excitement too of like, what if we did this or what if you guys planned this? So I think moving into other events as well. So like the fashion show and film fest that we'll be partnering to do in November. Um, like curating art, just creating as many opportunities for representation and visibility of our artists and relatives in our community. We've talked about expanding outside of the Missoula area and visiting other locations. We've had requests for people or like come to our area. So we're figuring out like how can we make that happen? And then one of the things that we've talked about as well is having like a brick and mortar space. Like we would really love to have a physical location where we could open a shop, like a co-op, or host First Friday events in our own space, but then also have that like workshop or maker space where we can gather to do classes together or just gather together and share community with each other. And we've talked about youth programming. That's something that I'm really passionate about. I love working with our young people. And yeah, we just have tons of big dreams still and are just trying to figure out how to make them all happen. We joke, Letitia and I joke around that we're the Indigenous Laverne and Shirley, and we're gonna make our dreams come true. But yeah, I think just continuing to stay community informed and like hear what ideas our community wants and needs and what people are willing to contribute to and support. And then yeah, we're just continuing to stay as community informed as possible and yeah, hoping to share with everybody.
I have a question that, I hear these big dreams, and I also know what a huge lift that everything has been up to this point. I also know that you and Tisha both are working moms, and I don't mean like just this enterprise. Like you all have a lot going on in your lives, and I would love if you would be willing to share with us, how do you how are you taking care of your families and yourselves in all of this as you're thinking through it? I feel like so many uh Indigenous artists and artists in general are often finding themselves having to juggle two or three things at once to make ends meet. And while this is a way to build that economic empowerment in and of itself, it's also, I know for you all, it's one of the many things that you're doing, and so I would love to hear any words of wisdom or advice or gosh, don't do this. um,
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think when we first got into it and launched, there was so much excitement that we were like, literally did an event every single month for like from October to I think February. And no, I think from October to even April or May. And then we were like, took a break and then did our summer market in June. And so like for that first 6 months, we just like hit the ground like running and it was crazy and it was so much fun. But then we were like, oh my God, we need to breathe. Like this is crazy. Because it is just the two of us for the most part. And I a couple of things I think have made a huge difference. One is our friendship and being able to come to each other and talk really openly and respectfully with each other about kind of where we're at and how we're feeling and what we need from each other. And that's been really awesome and crucial to making it work still. And then we involve our families a lot. So our kids come to the events and our family members help as much as they're able to. And then just taking breaks. Like we have learned to say no to things. Like we're both like so eager and happy to do this, but we have kind of like given ourselves like that tough love of like you can't say yes to every single thing even as much as we want to. And so just giving ourselves permission, I think, to say no to certain things even if we wish that we could, and just being okay with that um has something that we've had to like grow into and learn to do. We took the summer off after summer market and then just enjoyed time working and with our families and not doing Indigenous Made for the summer. And yeah, just trying to prioritize that and just check in with each other and with ourselves about where we're at. And having a partner has been amazing because when I've needed to step back and take care of myself, she stepped up, and um, I tried to do the same for her. So just having that partnership and friendship has been crucial. And I think just understanding from our community too, like I think at first when we launched, people thought that it was like this organization that was like, a staffed organization, fully staffed, and they're doing these things. And then we're like, no, it's just us. And so I think there's that understanding now of, okay, it's just the two of you. So I think there's a lot of grace and understanding from our community as well, that they don't expect the world from us. They know it's just the two of us and that we do the best that we can and always accept help when it's offered.
In that regard, I just want to read a comment from an artist who's participated. Stella Null says, "Thank you for all that you have done and are doing. It has really been so impactful for the community. The events I have gone to or participated in have been some of my favorite things ever. I'm excited for the future, you all." I think that's
Thank
a
you,
real
Stella.
shining example
Love
of
Stella.
of what you've all put into it, and how it's been received and perceived. So thank you for that. Are there any additional questions from folks who have joined us that have not been put in the chat? I want to give some space. Stony and I have been weighing in quite a bit here, and I've always got many more questions, and I know Stony does as well. But we'd love to hear if there's any other comments from the group.
While folks are, maybe feel free to unmute if you would like, feeling brave to use your voice, and feel free to drop them in the chat too, while you build your courage and questions. I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your precious time with us. I mean, you do have to be judicious in what you say yes to and what you say no to, being a finite human and having so many responsibilities. And so we're just really grateful for you taking the time to share with us today. I know I have been very curious ever since the beginning, and I will say personally, as a representative of open air, it was really a treat to go to your winter market and see so many open air alum there in the community. I just had a lot of it was just really resonant for my heart space to see that kind of um, kind of collaboration that happened out in the universe. So wonderful that you're doing such great work supporting Indigenous artists. And I hope that, one of the key parts about sustainability is always the question. And so, and the gift of sustainability is that we get to keep enjoying the fruits of your hard labor. And so I hope that your kind of reciprocal caring for one another, you and Letitia, will help, and the community's awareness and support of your efforts will lend itself to many years of us getting to enjoy the fruits of all your hard work.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate being here. That's something we talk about too. It's like we want this to outlive us. Like this is something that we wanted to create for our community and for our daughters and for their children, and that we launched it, but it's not about the two of us. It's about our whole community. And so hoping to see this just exists now, that it won't go away.
Have y'all had a chance to chat with the ladies over at Handmade Montana, with the Missoula Made, Montana Made fair that they put on in so many places? That's become kind of, a almost like it seemed like a predictable and sustainable, like really established fair. Have y'all had a chance to have conversations with those guys?
I have not, but I know Letitia has and has participated as a maker at some of their markets, and then also with the Missoula makers and that community as well. We've been able to work with them and visit with them. We've partnered with them even, and yeah, that's been just awesome and welcoming too. It's like just the artist community and helping each other, and that's one thing too. Is like we've been really well received by people too. That was one thing that we weren't before we launched. Like, well, we know that we want this as Indigenous people. Like, what are the non-Indigenous people going to think? And I think that's where the nerves that I talked about at our first winter market, where it was just us having our own solo event, where we were like, what if nobody comes? Like, what if it's just the people here and their families? And then just to see all of the people of all different walks of life coming through and supporting Indigenous art was beautiful. It's beautiful every time. It like is breathtaking to me.
I think that when you were talking about the objectives and the values, the community building aspect of it, and you specifically touched on the fact that there's a cross-sector intentionality there. And I've had conversations with individuals, non-native individuals, who have said, is it only for Indigenous people? There's that question
Yeah.
that's sort of hanging out there. And have had conversations with folks that I've said, absolutely not. And you're are welcome, encouraged, post event, saying how wonderful the space was and how welcomed it felt for everybody involved. I think that sometimes you had mentioned feeling sort of singled out or exposed in a way that's not comfortable, that can feel a lot of different ways, to be the only Indigenous artist in the room, or called in as one of only or a few Indigenous artists to participate in outside events, can be incredibly intimidating, and can also be problematical in some ways as well. And so just love that there was this intentionality too to the community building aspect, that it's broad as well as being deepening for Indigenous community and Indigenous artists together. I love that.
I'm glad that you brought up the questions too. That's like immediately something that we recognize, is that people felt really comfortable asking, like, is it okay for me to purchase this? Is it okay for me to wear this? We've had like at a market somebody come over and say like, I saw these beautiful earrings and I don't know if it's appropriate for me to wear them. And we're like, run and go get them before somebody else buys them. Like, yes, wear them. And we've talked a lot about when you are purchasing directly from an artist, that it's benefiting that artist, and you're not getting something that's like native inspired or culturally inappropriate or appropriated. And you're helping that artist. And then if you're wearing those beautiful earrings, you can tell somebody like, this is the artist and this is how you could support that artist, and go find their social media page or their website, and like you're promoting them as well. And so yeah, that's one of the most fun conversations that we get to have.
That's every time I'm having a conversation with somebody at any type of an art market or in a gallery setting, if you purchase that, make sure you learn about the
Yeah.
artist and talk about them. Every time somebody compliments you, whether it's coming into your home and seeing a beautiful painting, or whether it's that worn art, or whatever
Yeah.
it is.
One of my other favorite things that like now that we've had several of these events, and we have some artists who are like their jewelry and earrings specifically are like very like in demand, and like we recognize each other out in community of like, oh, are those Christina's earrings? Are those Giselle's earrings? And like we recognize each other by like our earrings, and it's like this, yeah, it's amazing. So much fun.
I've had that. I've had the recognition at like Costco and at like Santa Fe Indian Market. Oh, is that so and so? Is that I love it. All right. Well, I want to reiterate Sony's thanks and appreciation, Deja, for the beautiful presentation, for the giving of your time and yourself and all of this. And are there any last minute closing remarks or questions from anybody? If not, just looks like thanks coming through on the chat. And so thank you, Dacia. I hope
Yeah,
that
thanks again for
you
having me. Really appreciate
and
it.
everyone here has a wonderful rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks again. Okay. Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining today.